The Family Feud cameras were rolling on a Thursday afternoon in Atlanta when a man named Gerald Putnam, 67 years old, retired insurance broker from Macon, Georgia, leaned toward his microphone and said it clearly enough for the back row to hear, "You know what you are, Harvey? You're a token. That's all any of you are." The studio did not immediately explode. It went the other direction. 300 people produced a silence so complete that the hum of the studio lights became audible. Steve Harvey, who had been walking back toward the podium from a commercial break position, stopped walking. He stood exactly where he was, 10 feet from Gerald Putnam, at a slight angle, his body neither advancing nor retreating. He looked at Gerald for 4 full seconds. The floor manager had one hand raised toward the production booth. 2 security staff at the edge of the stage had already shifted their weight. And then Steve Harvey, in a voice calibrated so precisely that it reached every corner of the building without being raised above a conversational register, said 5 words, "Sir. This is my house." What happened in the 90 seconds that followed would be replayed 380 million times in 11 days and would be described by 17 separate media organizations as the most controlled and devastating response in the history of American television. It was a Thursday in March, and the taping had been running well since 10 in the morning. The Putnam family had come from Macon: Gerald, his son Travis, Travis's wife Kelsey, Gerald's younger sister Norma, and Norma's adult son Patrick. They were a mixed bag of energy. Travis was warm and engaged. Kelsey was competitive and quick. Norma was a natural comedian who had the audience on her side before the first round ended. Gerald had been an outlier from the start, a man whose competitiveness had an edge to it that was slightly too sharp for the occasion, who answered questions with the precise aggression of someone who had something to prove beyond winning a game show. The production team had noted it in the green room. Nothing actionable, just equality. The Putnam family's opponents were the Washington family from Augusta, a multi-generational team led by Dorothy Washington, 73. A retired school principal whose composure under pressure was the kind that gets built over decades of managing rooms full of people who think they know better. Dorothy had been playing Family Feud with the particular calm of a woman who has spent 40 years watching the room and reading it correctly. She had landed 4 of the top answers in the first 3 rounds. The audience loved her. Gerald Putnam had not been loving the audience loving Dorothy Washington. It had been visible in small ways: the quality of his attention when she answered, the way his jaw had set during the second round when Dorothy's family pulled ahead. It was the look of a man who had decided something about the order of things and was watching that order be disputed. Nobody in that studio knew it was about to become a history-making afternoon. The break before the 4th round had lasted 3 minutes. Gerald had said nothing during it that anyone on camera or crew had noted. And then Steve Harvey had walked back from his mark, and something in the sight of Steve, relaxed, easy, at home on this stage in the way that only comes from 23 years of belonging here, had apparently been the thing that tipped whatever Gerald had been holding. He leaned to the microphone. He said the words. Steve Harvey stopped walking. He stood at that angle for 4 seconds. A camera to his left caught the moment his expression changed, not to anger, not to hurt, but to something harder to name. Something that looked like recognition. The face of a man who has heard a version of this word his entire life and who has decided, at some specific point in his past, exactly how he is going to respond to it when it comes. The decision had already been made years ago. He was simply executing it. "Sir," he said. Pause. "This is my house." He did not move toward Gerald. He let the words reach the room on their own. He waited. The audience did not cheer immediately. They absorbed it first. The 5 words traveled the room, and as they traveled, Gerald Putnam's face began doing something that faces do when they have said something in public, and discovered that the public has the answer. The certainty drained out of it in real time, visible on 3 cameras simultaneously. His son Travis had taken 2 steps sideways, creating physical distance from his father on the stage in a move so instinctive it told its own story. Kelsey had her eyes on the floor. Norma was looking at Gerald with an expression that suggested this was not the first time and that she had stopped being surprised. Steve Harvey walked to the center of the stage. He did not look at the floor manager. He did not signal security. He addressed Gerald Putnam directly, in a voice that the entire studio could hear without amplification, because the room was that quiet. He said, "I have been doing this for 23 years. I have stood on stages since before some of the people in this room were born. I built what I have from nothing, and I do mean nothing. I lived in a car. I ate from trash cans. I made my first dollar in comedy in a room that had more empty chairs than full ones, and I kept going back. Nobody gave me a seat at any table. I built the table. I own the table, and you are sitting at it right now." He paused. "So when you use a word like that about me, in this building, what you're really saying is that you don't understand what you're looking at. That's not my problem. That's yours." The studio fell completely silent. Gerald Putnam had shrunk by approximately 2 inches over the course of that paragraph. It was not a metaphor. His posture had changed. His chin had dropped. His hands, which had been resting with the easy confidence of a man who has never been answered, were now clasped in front of him in a position that belonged to a different kind of man entirely. Steve Harvey was not done. He turned to the audience. He said, "I want to speak to everyone in this room and everyone watching at home for one moment." He looked directly into the camera. "The word this man used today, I've heard it my whole life in 100 different forms. You got lucky. Someone helped you. You don't really belong here. I want you to hear me when I say this. The only people who say those things are the people who cannot explain your success any other way. Because if they admitted it was work, real work, decades of it, surviving things that would have ended them, they would have to ask themselves some questions they are not ready to answer. So they reach for the other explanation." He stopped. "I don't need anyone to explain my life to me. I lived it." He turned back to Gerald. Gerald Putnam said, in a voice that had lost most of its architecture, "I shouldn't have said that." It came out flat, with the specific flatness of a man who is saying something because the room requires it rather than because he has arrived somewhere new. Steve Harvey looked at him for a long moment. He said, "No, you shouldn't have." He did not accept it or reject it. He simply confirmed its accuracy and moved on. He picked up his cards from the podium. He looked at the floor manager. He said, "We're going to keep playing. Both families." He looked at the Putnam family, at Travis, Kelsey, Norma, Patrick, and he said, "You didn't say it. You don't carry it." He looked at Dorothy Washington's family across the stage. Dorothy had not moved during any of it. She was standing at her podium with the posture of a woman who has managed rooms full of people who think they know better and who has long since stopped being impressed by any of them acting out. When Steve looked at her, she gave a small, precise nod. Steve nodded back. He pulled out his phone before resuming the game. He called his foundation manager and announced, on the stage floor, a contribution of $30,000 to the Equal Opportunity Pathways Fund, a program he had established in 2019 to support first-generation professionals of color entering broadcast media. He said, "Because every time somebody uses a word like that, the correct response is to make sure more people who look like me are standing where I'm standing." The audience erupted. Gerald Putnam looked at the floor. Both families played the final round. The Washington family won. Dorothy Washington answered the last question with the efficiency of a woman who has never wasted a word in her life, and the board confirmed her answer in the top 3, and the buzzer sounded, and the audience gave Dorothy's family a standing ovation that lasted 90 seconds longer than the production schedule allowed for. When the episode aired 5 weeks later, it had been edited to include the moment in full. The network made the decision in a meeting that reportedly lasted 7 minutes. The clip ran without cut or commentary. It reached 380 million views in 11 days. The hashtag #ThisIsMyHouse was used in 53 countries. 3 universities used the clip in communications courses the following semester as a case study in controlled, high-stakes public response. Gerald Putnam's son Travis released a public statement 4 days after the episode aired. It said his father had been wrong, that the family did not share his views, and that they were grateful to Steve Harvey for responding with dignity rather than escalation. Gerald Putnam made no public statement. 3 months after the taping, Steve Harvey's Equal Opportunity Pathways Fund had received $2.4 million in donations from viewers who had seen the clip. The fund expanded its program capacity by 60%. 47 new participants were enrolled in the broadcast media track. A year after the taping, one of those participants, a 22-year-old woman from Memphis who had grown up watching Family Feud from a couch in a 2-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother and 2 siblings, graduated from the program and accepted a position as a production assistant at a major television network. She sent Steve Harvey a handwritten letter. He read it on his radio show. He said it was the only response to that day that he needed. 5 words had opened a room. What walked through it afterward did the rest. Today, if you search the phrase, "This is my house," one of the first results is still the clip. Not because of the man who prompted it, because of what Steve Harvey did with the moment after. He did not burn the stage down. He made it larger. He invited more people in. And then he went back to work. If this moment of absolute dignity and the 5 words that changed a room moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to know that the most powerful response to someone trying to diminish you is to remind them where they're standing. Have you ever watched someone answer hatred with something stronger than anger? Let us know in the comments. And ring that notification bell for more moments that remind us what real power looks like.